Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Preservation Resource Center virtual program tonight, hosted by special guest lecturer Robbie Cangelosi on his new Friends of the Cabildo Architecture Series book on Carrollton. We're so glad that you all have joined us this evening and are spending a little time with us. And I am so excited to hear from Robbie. He is, as so many of you know, the preeminent restoration architect here in the city and the expert on historic buildings. When St. Louis Cathedral needs to be repaired, Robbie's the guy they call. And so I'm very excited that we will hear from such an esteemed member of our community tonight. I'm Danielle Del Sol. I'm the Executive Director of the Preservation Resource Center. And once again, thank you so much for joining us for this free lecture tonight. For those of you who might be new to our programs, the Preservation Resource Center is a 46-year-old nonprofit dedicated to the preservation of New Orleans historic architecture, neighborhoods, and cultural identity. We're an organization that believes that New Orleans history and buildings and culture should be protected and prized, not threatened. And that all of our work is centered on realizing that vision. We do preservation education throughout the year, helping people understand how to buy, renovate, and maintain historic properties. We offer low-income homeowners free home repairs, those who live in historic districts, with our Revival Grants program. And we do digital programming throughout the year. As you all have seen, we really had to innovate due to the pandemic. And starting in May, we started doing digital programs 3 times a week that were free to engage and inspire our community through difficult times. And the support of our members and our donors made all of that possible. They make all of our work possible throughout the year. So for those of you who are new to PRC, I want to encourage you to support the PRC by becoming a member. Visit our website at prcno.org. Memberships start at just $50 a year, and you get, in exchange for that $50, you not only support our great work year round, but you get a subscription to Preservation in Print, our award-winning magazine sent straight to your home 9 times a year. You can also buy merchandise while you're on our website. We have great holiday gifts, books, masks with little shotgun houses and Creole cottages on them. They're really great. Our book, which you can see in the background here, Building on the Past, Saving Historic New Orleans, came out this time last year, and we're very proud of that work. We have tote bags and many other things. So check it out, prcno.org. You can also make a donation while you're there, or you can give a really great and timely Christmas gift or Hanukkah gift, which is tickets to view our holiday home tour, which is live through December 31st. You can view the videos anytime you like in the comfort of your own home, tour 6 stunning homes with really wonderful homeowners. It's a delightful series. We've had over 1,400 tickets sold and more to go. So please check it out, prcno.org. Thank you again to our sponsors and all of our donors who make all of this work possible, all of our members who support us in so many different ways throughout the year. I wish all of you a happy holiday. And thank you so much to Robbie Cangelosi for coming on tonight to do this program. I know this book is so long in the making, and I'm really excited to hear about what Robbie went through to gather all the information to create such a rich book. We actually have this book for sale through the PRC. So again, prcno.org is our website. You can go on our website and buy a copy, and we'll ship it to you. A little bit more about Robbie before I turn it over to him. Robbie is an architectural historian and licensed architect. He holds a Master of Architecture degree from the University of Florida, and he is the president of Koch and Wilson, which again, as I said, is the preeminent architectural restoration firm in the city of New Orleans. His practice has focused on preservation, restoration, renovation, and adaptive reuse of hundreds of historic structures in Louisiana and Mississippi, as well as archival research reports and architectural assessment studies for over 35 years. Robbie taught New Orleans architecture at Tulane University for over 2 decades and is an instructor for design art seminars throughout the country. He has served as a historical advisor and appeared in programs for HGTV, and WYES TV New Orleans. And last but not least, he was co-editor of the last 2 volumes of the Friends of the Cabildo New Orleans Architecture series, which were the books on Jefferson City and the University section. And now, of course, the latest edition on Carrollton. I'm also very proud to say that Robbie is a way back when PRC alumni. I know that he was very involved with Preservation in Print magazine as an editor for some time, and we're very proud that he was part of the PRC family formally at some point in his career. So Robbie, thank you again so much for joining us tonight. And I, like everybody watching, look forward to your presentation. Before I turn it over, I just want to let everybody know how this seminar will work. So I cannot see you. You can see me and you can see Robbie and his presentation, but we cannot see you. However, we can communicate with you. So I encourage all of you throughout the presentation to submit your questions that you might have for Robbie in the chat box. There's also a box at the bottom of your screen that says Q&A. That can also take your questions. Either one is fine, but I'll be monitoring the questions throughout Robbie's presentation. And at the end, we will have time for Q&A. So again, anytime the question pops in your brain, just type it in the box. I'll be watching and we will have some great Q&A back and forth with Robbie once the presentation is over. And now, without any further ado, Robbie Cangelosi, please take it away.
Thank you, Danielle, and thank you everyone for attending tonight. Let me get my presentation up here. A few weeks will be the 50th anniversary of the Friends of the Cabildo Architecture series. The first volume, The Lower Garden District, came out in 1971. This was before there was a Historic District Landmarks Commission, a Preservation Resource Center, and the Friends of the Cabildo, perhaps along with Louisiana Landmark Society, were the leading preservation organizations in the city of New Orleans. And the PRC is somewhat of an outgrowth of the Friends of the Cabildo's architecture series and their building watcher tours. The PRC received a grant from the Junior League, which helped funded them initially, but a lot of the original authors of this series who have now passed away, and a lot of the same people involved with the Friends of the Cabildo helped to formulate the Preservation Resource Center. This is the 9th volume in the series. I've been working on it for 23 years now. The last one came out in 1997, and in the process of working on it, my house went under 6 feet of water in the Mid-City neighborhood. A lot of the research originally was done was lost. A lot of the archives at Tulane University were flooded in the basement, the Carrollton newspapers and so forth. So it has taken a while to get to this point. This is also the first volume that's really been written by one person. All the other volumes had multiple contributors to it, and just with people passing away, I've been sort of inherited this series unto myself here. I am currently working on the Vieux Carré book. I hope I live long enough to get it on out. The Vieux Carré book will be slightly different than the other books. The other books was a selection of the architecture in the neighborhoods. It wasn't ever intended to include every single historic property. But the Vieux Carré the Vieux Carré book will in fact do that. We have covered the entire riverfront from Parish Lawn to Parish Lawn, except for the French Quarter and the Garden District, the old city of Lafayette. And the reason being was the Friends of the Cabildo made a conscious effort to bring attention to neighborhoods that needed preservation. The Lower Garden District did not have protection there, so they wrote about it. The Friends of the Cabildo created the name Lower Garden District. It was really Sam Wilson had done that. So this volume here covers Lower Lawn, and it's somewhat confusing in New Orleans that the Lower Lawn is above Upper Lawn in New Orleans, but we're talking about 2 lawns of different plantations. Lower Lawn, Mississippi River, I-10, and Monticello Street are the current parish lawn. Now, all this land was originally given by the French monarchy to the founder of our city, Bienville, a French Canadian. And this title, which really ran from what is today Common Street in the CBD, all the way through the current parish lawn, was given to Bienville. He originally ran this in a very feudal manner. He had Germans and French living on his property, and his payment, they had to give him so many of their chickens that they raised, so much things that they were raising there. That was their payment. Many of the Germans and French will eventually leave Bienville's plantation, and by 1775, most of the Germans had moved upriver to what we call the German coast today. Now, Bienville is called back to France by the government, and when he returns back to New Orleans, he tries to recapture his land that he was given. He had to prove that there was some sort of settlement on there. And the map you see before you right now is the French archival drawing from 1737 showing who was living on what land there. Now, by today's standards, this is the French Quarter. This is sort of upside down. The writing is all vertical there, so I flipped the map over here. This is generally the way we view the river, with the French Quarter going around into the current Jefferson Parish lines. This is sort of an abstraction of all that property, and this is the Carrollton area we're talking about here. In 1727, Nicholas Chauvin de Lafreniere and a man by the name of Adam were some of these people that were living on this land that Bienville had sort of leased to them in this feudal manner. Now, at some point, Nicholas Chauvin's son, Louis Leberton, will acquire it. We know who owned the property, but we don't know quite often how they got it. Based on records in the Library of Congress, they say many of the early records were destroyed there, so we know the personalities. We're really not clear on how they necessarily got that. Now, Louis Chauvin's son-in-law, Nicholas Chauvin's son-in-law, Louis Leberton, acquires the property at some date. It may have been as a wedding present. We're not really sure. Now, when Louis Leberton passes away, the tutor of Leberton's children, Jean McCarthy, in 1781 will acquire the property. I don't know how it was awarded to him, but that's what the government at the time frame had done. Now, when McCarthy passes away, his three children, Louis, Edmund, and Marie McCarthy, will inherit the land in 1808. Edmund will sell on out, and we'll see the house he'll build in St. Bernard Parish, which was used by Andrew Jackson during the Battle of New Orleans, from the proceeds from the selling of his third of the property. It'll be Louis and Marie who will sell it to the developers who will create Carrollton. Now, Marie will marry a man by the name of LeSueur, and sometimes it's referred to as the McCarthy-LeSueur plantation. Here is a map here showing the McCarthy property. The original plantation house was at the river in Clinton Street. During the Battle of New Orleans, on the McCarthy plantation, General Coffee and General Carroll will encamp there on their way down to St. Bernard to fight in the Battle of New Orleans there. And Carrollton will be named for General Carroll, who will be governor of Tennessee and so forth. And the portrait you see there was loaned to us, the image was loaned to us by the Tennessee Historical Society. These two men will gain a national reputation, really only second to Andrew Jackson from fighting in the Battle of New Orleans. Now, Edmund, who had sold his portion by the time of the Battle of New Orleans to his siblings there, he will build this house down in what is today St. Bernard Parish, which will be General Andrew Jackson's headquarters down in what is today St. Bernard. Now, the two surviving siblings will sell out their land to Bernard Maroney, Samuel Cone, Lawrence Milledette, John Slidell, and the New Orleans Canal and Banking Company to develop Carrollton. Now, the New Orleans Canal and Banking Company is very important because they are the people that dug the New Basin Canal, which will be very instrumental in the development of Carrollton. They will retain Charles Zimpel in 1833 to lay out Carrollton. Now, Carrollton Avenue was originally called Canal Street, and unlike Canal Street in the CBD, which never had a canal down it, Canal Street in Carrollton did have a canal down it. This was Chauvin's canal, in which he had water source to run his sawmill there, much the way that there was a canal down Elysian Fields, which ran a lumber mill down there, and Elysian Fields direction was determined by that sawmill canal there. Now, Zimpel creates a very bizarre plan. What he does is he creates these super blocks. And then it was up to the people that bought a super block to take a super block and divide it into 4 squares, which would be today's municipal squares. And then those 4 squares were further subdivided into all these lots in here. This is going to be a real problem because some people don't cut the streets through. There was a flaw in the laying out of Zimpel's plan, in that some of the streets didn't line up. So there was a real problem with the laying out of the streets in Carrollton because of the way it developed. Now, the important components for the development of Carrollton will be the New Basin Canal, which is dug in 1838 in what is today basically the Pontchartrain Expressway. It ran from where about the Superdome is today on out to the lakefront. It was dug by Irish immigrants, many of whom died digging the canal through the swamps. It was 6 miles long, 6 feet deep, and 60 feet across. The way you originally got to Carrollton was not the way, at least I think, of getting to Carrollton. I live on Carrollton Avenue, but generally I think of Carrollton, of coming down St. Charles Avenue to Carrollton. Back then, the way you got to Carrollton was you came down what is today Tulane Avenue, then known as Common Street. You then hooked up with Carrollton, what is today Carrollton Avenue, the old Carrollton Canal Street, and you then went into Carrollton that way. When eventually they put the New Orleans and Carrollton Railroad in, later on they will build St. Charles Avenue along its length. And of course, the New Orleans and Carrollton Avenue Railroad, which begins operation in 1835, is a very significant factor tying the cities of New Orleans and Carrollton together. Today, it is our St. Charles Avenue streetcar line. It is the oldest continually operating rail line in the nation. It was originally had steam engines that pulled it. There were all sorts of different mechanisms that powered it. They'll eventually become mule drawn. And then for the 1884 World's Fair, they can demonstrate that streetcars can actually be powered by electricity. It was about a 40-minute ride from downtown New Orleans to the town of Carrollton. There was a very handsome car barn for the railroads at the end of the line, which today the streetcar line turns onto Carrollton Avenue, but it originally stopped at what is today Carrollton Avenue. There was originally a car barn which was built in 1835. It burned. And then we get this very handsome car barn designed by Gallier in 1839 in this Gothic style. Also at the end of the lawn was the Carrollton Hotel. And like the car barn, it suffered a similar fate. It was destroyed, the first one, and is replaced with the building in 1842 that you see in the images here. It looked very much like a South Louisiana country home with a gallery going all the way around the structure there. And it was a quite handsome structure, and people used to take the train on out to Carrollton to go to the hotel for dinner, for concerts, for all sorts of events. It was a way of getting out the hustle and bustle of the city proper. Adjacent to the hotel was the Carrollton Gardens. This is a photograph in the Historic New Orleans collection. You can barely see it here. Here's a lithograph of the Carrollton Gardens. They were based on these gardens in New York City, Niblo's Gardens, and here you see an advertisement for concerts out there, the second grade concert of the German Jagger Band up in there. Carrollton's development is primarily going to be initially by German immigrants, and they'll be very important for the development of it. Here you see the beginning of Canal Street, the name in here. This would be Carrollton Avenue here. The rail line would come all the way to the river there and go into the car barn. Notice for the sales of the property in Carrollton were listed in the local papers. Generally, it was auctioned off initially at the Arcade Exchange on Magazine Street between Gravier and Natchez Street. Here we see some plans for the development of the town of Carrollton. Here you see the overall plan. This would be St. Charles Avenue coming here, and this is Carrollton, once again, marked Canal Street in here. You'll notice that the development is very sparse up in here. It's going to take a long time for Carrollton really to develop, and this is what they hoped Carrollton would eventually look like. But in 1855, the streets didn't really not get very far away from the river there. Here in 1878, this is after Carrollton's annexed by the city of New Orleans, Look here, here's St. Charles, here's Carrollton Avenue. This would be back at Claiborne Avenue. None of the streets are making as far back as Claiborne. You see all the swamps in here. This Mark City Park was today we know is Audubon Park there. Other maps show the development of Carrollton in 1880, in the 1880s and 1894. And you can still see in 1894, we're already annexed as the second municipal district in New Orleans. Here's Claiborne here. None of these streets are making their way back there. This is all swampland up in here. A lot of this area was originally subdivided by a free man of color by the name of Pierre Marly. It was so far into the swamps and so prone to flooding that in the early 20th century, the Louisiana Supreme Court abandoned this as abandoned palmetto fields and awarded title to the city of New Orleans. Now, Carrollton is an unincorporated area between 1833 and 1845 is a village. It becomes an incorporated town between 1845 and 1859, and it becomes a city between 1859 until it's annexed by the city of New Orleans in 1874. In 1843, while it's still a village, there's only 10 stores in the whole town and only 1,000 residents. In 1859, just when we're transferring from a town to a city, there were just under 3,000 residents. There were 95 free people of color living there, and there was 195 enslaved Africans in the city. By 1869, there were 200 stores and about 4,400 citizens living in the town of Carrollton. Now, Carrollton is not the only Carrollton in the United States, which I learned the hard way doing research on National Archives and all. I kept finding, I was so excited, I thought on eBay, I found some of the dishes from the Carrollton Hotel. Well, it wasn't the Carrollton Hotel in New Orleans, it was the Carrollton Hotel in Kentucky. There are 13 other Carrolltons from Alabama to Virginia, and so doing some of the national research, I kept get excited about a find, and only to find out I had the wrong Carrollton there. Carrollton had its own mayors. John Hampson was very instrumental with the New Orleans and Carrollton Railroad. He was the first, and Albert Bryce, seen in the upper right here, was the last mayor of Carrollton who oversaw its annexation. And many of the names you see over here, such as Mr. Gogrieve, right here, are all of German ancestry. Being an architecture series, of course, we get heavy into architecture. The first house in Carrollton, according to a history written at the time of the centennial celebration of the United States, said the first house was built in 1845 or 1855 at the Mississippi River and at Carrollton Avenue. That area is today gone. So the first house, they're not quite sure when it was built, and the location was sort of in that general area. From the wonderful notarial archives, we were able to find some of these beautiful watercolor drawings, and we were able to trace some of the history of some of the homes that started off in, say, the Federal style, and then later got remodeled into the Greek Revival style. And here you see some of these beautiful watercolor drawings of the early architecture in Carrollton. This house here had this wonderful Greek Revival belvedere on top of it, and these attic windows in here. So we have from the larger homes to the more modest homes, and we checked all the archives everywhere we could to find information on Carrollton. We were able to locate some early photographs of some of the houses, of which no longer stand any longer. There was some early histories written of the town of Carrollton. There was some early thesis written in the town of Carrollton that was published in the Louisiana Landmark Society, the Louisiana Quarterly. Here we see Levee Street. Now, unfortunately, the oldest part of Carrollton is now gone. The levee was always a problem in Carrollton, and the most recent levee setbacks destroyed the oldest portion of town. What really culminated in the annexation of Carrollton is that Carrollton was not maintaining its levees. And every time the levees broke in Carrollton, New Orleans flooded. There are reports that we have in the book of people on top of the St. Charles Hotel viewing the entire area flooded. Water from Carrollton would go all the way into the French Quarter with some of these crevasses which would happen. But here we see the levee, and here is Levee Street, which gets wiped out. All these buildings are gone. These are not the same building, but these very nice commercial buildings that have been since eliminated. The primary business of Carrollton was lumber. In 1847, the sale of wood seems to be the principal employment of the inhabitants in Carrollton. But there were also other businesses such as ice, wood, and coal. Here's a contractor here. Here's someone selling beef, sausage, and poultry. We looked at the various businesses that were located in Carrollton, as well as the various businessmen who were operating in Carrollton, once again, primarily of German descent. We looked also at the entertainment that came to Carrollton. A lot of time, the entertainment would spill over from New Orleans, would make a stop in Carrollton. Dan Rice, whose advertisement you see right here and over here, Dan Rice is a very colorful character in American history. He is the prototype for Uncle Sam. His carnival costume, his clown or circus costume, is what will become Uncle Sam when John Nash draws Uncle Sam. It's actually based on Dan Rice. Dan Rice was the first celebrity in any New Orleans carnival parade. He appeared and rode in the first Crew of Rex parade. Dan Rice is also credited with the saying, "Jump on the bandwagon." Dan Rice invited Zachary Taylor, the only Louisiana president, to ride on his circus bandwagon, hence the name "To Jump on the Bandwagon" comes about from Dan Rice's inviting Zachary Taylor to ride in his campaign efforts in the country. There was also the Floating Palace, and here we see the Grand Panorama, which appeared in Carrollton there. Horse racing is also important to the development of Carrollton. What is today the Metairie Cemetery was a race course. Here you see what's Tulane Avenue, Common Street here. This will be Canal Street, shown as a Shell Road, and here's Orleans and Bienville as Shell Roads up in here. Here's the New Basin Canal, but what is today Metairie Cemetery will be a race course, and that was considered part of Carrollton at the time frame. You got to remember, Jefferson Parish is carved out of Orleans Parish in 1825, and then New Orleans starts taking back parts of Jefferson Parish. They first took back the city of Lafayette, then they took back the city of Jefferson, then they took back the town of Carrollton. And here we see the Eclipse race course that was in Greenville at the time frame. Here is the old Metairie race course, now demolished, part of the cemetery, and here's a nice drawing of it there. We got into the various celebrations that took place in Carrollton. We looked at how they celebrated Christmas there. We hear today a lot about Juneteenth of African-American celebrations. But back in the 19th century, it was April 30th that in New Orleans and Carrollton, African-Americans celebrated the passage of the 15th Amendment to the Constitution, which granted African-American males the right to vote. And were able to document a lot of African-American activity in the city of Carrollton during Reconstruction and then later on. We looked at the Carrollton newspapers. There was various newspapers that were published in Carrollton, the first one in 1851, the last one in 1873. These are the beginning dates, and the last one there will be absorbed into New Orleans when it's annexed the following year. Carrollton as a community had its own municipal improvements. Here we see the Carrollton Market, which was on Dublin Street. There's a park there today. It was built in 1848. Carrollton always had issues with its streets. I mentioned how the survey was flawed, and they're constantly suing people for opening up their property, failing to cut the streets through, not clearing the ditches there. There's a lot of contracts which we came across for paving some of the streets. And here are some of various images we were able to locate of various streets in Carrollton. As I mentioned, levees are very important to the history of Carrollton. Here you see the old car barn over here, this wonderful little structure on the levee right there. Here you see some African Americans working on the resetting of the levee. Here's a high water up against the levee right here. And you see there were a lot of people that lived really on the riverside of the levee in houses over there throughout the history of Carrollton. This is the last setback of the levees in Carrollton in 1891. Here was the river's edge out here, and they lost all this. Louisiana Supreme Court came up, in my opinion, a very bizarre ruling. When they put the levees on people's property, the Supreme Court of Louisiana ruled the owners had to be compensated for their demolished buildings but they didn't have to be paid or compensated for their property in which the levee was put, because the Supreme Court said, oh, you own the land, it just happens to be under that levee there. You can't get to it, and you can't use it, but you still own it there. So the people weren't compensated for their land, for the resetting of the levee there. We got into the various churches in the town of Carrollton being primarily settled by Germans. It's not going to be primarily Roman Catholic like the city of New Orleans. The first church will be Methodist Episcopal and built in 1843. And we did look at the various churches and religious institutions in the area. Here's an early drawing from Mata della Rosa and Father Prim in the rectory. Father is very instrumental in the building of the current church. The Catholics actually had several churches there that get merged, and you have the Germans and the French, and during the Franco-German War, Franco-Prussian War, there's fights in the congregation as to favoritism to which country during the war, and they're ousting priests, bringing different ethnic priests on in to sort of get along with this ethnic rivalry going on in the town. This was an orphanage run by the Daughters of Charity. Some of you may remember the very large hats that the Daughters of Charity used to wear when they ran Charity Hospital in downtown New Orleans. We were able to get from the archives of the Daughters of Charity up north some photographs of some of the buildings that they had in the town of Carrollton. Now, the New Orleans and Carrollton Railroad was not the only railroad servicing Carrollton. Here would be the New Orleans and Carrollton Railroad, down along up in here. In 1853, from Carrollton on out to the lake, which they called East End, was the Jefferson and Lake Pontchartrain Railroad in 1853. Now, West End is over here at the end of the New Basin Canal. This is East End over here. And they built hotels and casinos and restaurants out at East End as well. And then the New Orleans, Jackson, Great Northern Railroad came through Carrollton right along and through here in 1858. Carrollton was supposed to be a connecting hub to railroads around the country. The courthouse for Jefferson Parish was originally in the city of Lafayette. Then it was moved to the city of Jefferson, and then it's moved to Carrollton. The Carrollton courthouse is built in 1855. The surviving specifications for the building still are over in Gretna in the current courthouse. It's a very handsome structure designed by Henry Howard up in there, and it's got this great Greek Revival appearance to it. Here you see it when it's a McDonough school. Here there was a prison and so forth on the site. We're able to locate some of the prison drawings from the New Orleans Public Library. Sam Wilson had recalled, he grew up in the neighborhood. I'll show you his house in a little bit. He recalled watching executions on the grounds there of the courthouse. We got also into the Carrollton schools. There are some of the schools still survive, such as the Washington Street School, it's today on Fern Street. A lot of the street names have changed. When New Orleans annexed Carrollton, they had to change street names. They had, of course, we had a Canal Street in New Orleans. We couldn't have another Canal Street, so they changed it to Carrollton Avenue. We had Washington Avenue in what is the Garden District today. They couldn't have a Washington Avenue or street in the city of Carrollton. That's now Fern Street. So a lot of the street names in Carrollton, which were named for various presidents and numbers, had to be changed over time. Cemeteries. Originally laid out as Green Square, public square, and the original layout served as a cemetery as early as 1843, and a lot of the cemetery history, it goes in more detail in the Friends of the Cabildo book on the cemeteries there. We got into the capturing of Carrollton during the Civil War in 1862. After New Orleans is captured, Farragut goes on upriver. There were fortifications on each side of the river at Carrollton. There was a lot of fortifications in Carrollton to help defend the city of New Orleans from a northern attack. We got into there was a camp put out at the racetrack, which became Metairie Cemetery, which became a Confederate camp. They had these various Confederate leaders there. Then they were in control of what is Camp Parapet. Camp Parapet, there's the powder magazine, which I'll show you in a little bit, still here, but the fortification lines went all the way out into the swamps. And we got a lot of good information, a lot of documentation of life in the camp, how people would go from Carrollton to the camp, how the government passed a law that they were not allowed to take anything more than, say, the top rail of a fence. Well, after you took the top rail away, the next rail was the top rail, so they would steal it, and they would keep going on down. We have all these diary accounts of life in Carrollton and out at Camp Parapet. And of course, when the Union forces take on over, they get Camp Parapet, which is still there at the end of Causeway Boulevard. We have the various Union leaders. We have these letters being published from Jefferson Parish, Louisiana, of life in the various camps there. This is a communications tower put in Carrollton. It was put in a tree, and from here they were able to use signals to a signal house on the top of the custom house on Canal Street. They could be able, because of the bending of the river, they could communicate between New Orleans and Carrollton. We did get into looking at a lot of historic photographs. There's these wonderful photographs of snowfall in Carrollton. This great photograph, which I never knew about before. The Mississippi River in New Orleans actually froze over. They had all these chunks of ice there. And here we see some people standing along the banks of the river there, and all the ice in Carrollton. Here was a ferry landing that went between here and the West Bank. Here we have one of the flooding stages in Carrollton there. Now, the annexation of Carrollton to New Orleans takes about 10 years to do. There's a lot of controversy about this. New Orleans wants to annex them, as I said, because of the levee situation. Carrollton realized that if New Orleans annexed them, New Orleans would be stuck with all the bills, so they went on this big municipal campaign doing all sorts of improvements around town and so forth, and New Orleans got stuck with the bills. Excuse me. There's also, Carrollton starts annexing more and more of Jefferson Parish to try to throw it into New Orleans. There was plans that go so far as to take Carrollton all the way to St. Charles Parish, and New Orleans would have to annex all of that. Eventually, there is this compromise worked out, and New Orleans get what is today the 7th Municipal District in 1874. There's also some issues which developed legally, is that before New Orleans annexed Carrollton, there was a murder committed in Carrollton. A grand jury in Carrollton indicted the man, but when it comes to trial, Carrollton is part of New Orleans, so the defense claimed, wait, New Orleans can't try someone that was indicted in Jefferson Parish. And the Supreme Court came up with a ruling for municipal reasons. Carrollton is part of New Orleans, but for judicial reasons, Carrollton is part of Jefferson Parish. I don't understand how you come up with that. I'm not a lawyer, but that was the decision rendered. I did have some help with some of the attorneys at Jones Walker in sorting out some of these legal things for me. Here are some old photographs from Carrollton. This is Avis Ogilvy's house, who is a big supporter of the Friends of the Cabildo and the Preservation Resource Center. Her family, the Hoy family, had a sugar mill, which is today, they called it Hoyville. It remained in Jefferson Parish. They also had a brickyard there. They also were responsible for paving Carrollton Avenue at one time frame. Here we see some other houses that were in Carrollton. These three have been since demolished. This one was on, all three of these were on Carrollton. This house still stands. We were able to locate the original architectural drawings, this old photograph, and of course we shot new photographs. All the people working on the book are volunteers. The only paid person involved in working on the book was the photographer, Neil Alexander, who shot some very wonderful photographs. They're very small in the book, unfortunately. However, we are putting them at the archives of the Louisiana State Museum so that there'll be a record of all the architecture as it existed. The photographs were actually shot before Katrina. And so we do have some buildings in the book which didn't survive Katrina. Here we see various other buildings. This was a cistern manufacturing plant, which was at Earhart in Carrollton. The Piggly Wiggly, the grocery store on Carrollton Avenue. This was originally a post office. Here we have the Carrollton Streetcar Barn, the waterworks, and a nursery in the town of Carrollton. We did look at architectural drawings from various archives around town, our own archives, because we are over 100 years old at Coke and Wilson. Here you see two churches in the Carrollton neighborhood. Here we have Notre Dame Seminary and two banks that we're able to locate the drawings for. I'm sorry, I'm not moving here. Let me see what's going on. Why I'll stop here. Let me go back. Sorry. There we go. Now we're moving. We looked at residential architecture. This is the Great Prairie style house that's on Ferret Street. We looked at everything from small bungalows to larger houses like Thomas Sully's house over here. We looked at also national architectural firms that were doing pattern books, and we found some of the precedents for some of the houses which exist in Carrollton are right out of architectural pattern books. Here are the gates to Fontainebleau Drive we're able to locate. Once again, more photographs. This is Sam Wilson, the noted architectural historian in the lower right corner there. I'm not quite sure whether that's him in front of the house there. We have what's today the Bruno House on Carrollton Avenue, which is on the rear cover of the book. We were able to find, because there was a photographer in the neighborhood that documented a lot of Carrollton, Mr. Williams, and we were able to get a lot of interior photographs, which we're able to include it in the book. Here we've got some more flooding in Carrollton, and this is this is a house designed by C. Milo Williams on the right side for his brother there. And I'm not quite understanding why I'm having these glitches here. Okay, we did document 1,058 structures in the book, which we have all the information on. Only 123 are from the 19th century because I said it took a long time. Really, the bulk of the development of Carrollton is after annexation. The oldest house we recorded is 7835 Maple Street, which is the house you see right here, which is, I believe, still Ladder and Bloom headquarters. And the newest houses we recorded were built in 1950 on Claiborne, Dante, and Monroe Street. This is a series of the photographs that Neil Alexander had taken. We've got this wonderful Queen Anne house, this one on St. Charles Avenue with the great crestings on top of this mansard roof on the tower there. Here we have the remnants of the, excuse me, the Cloverland Dairy. A lot of the area, once you got close to the New Basin Canal where Xavier is and so forth, that was a lot of dairy lands. In fact, Riversville Long's family had a lot of manuscripts which we were able to research and get a lot of good information from. This was originally designed by Favreau and Liverday, and their succeeding firm, did the post office addition to the rear of the building, saving somewhat of the front in compliance with National Preservation Act of 1966, and added the new building to the rear. One of the older buildings on Oak Street there. A nice little vernacular house here, and a Tudor Revival house with the half timbering in the gables here. Unfortunately, we lost this house following Katrina. Some of the early prairie influence in here, the home of Andrew Jackson Higgins there. Here we have two Dutch Colonial Revival homes in the town of Carrollton with the gambrel roof on it. A late Italianate on the left and an Eastlake on the right. I'm sorry, I'm having problems. It's not responding as I'm moving the photographs of the cursor here. The house on the left is on Claiborne Avenue. Sears and Roebuck had several catalogs offering houses. They made a lot of the houses in Mansfield, Louisiana for use throughout the United States, but they also did concrete block houses. They had patented a concrete block machine, and they offered whole catalogs of concrete block houses. And this one is very similar to one of the stock houses offered by Sears and Roebuck. On the right side is a Mediterranean villa there. The Waldo Burton Memorial. This was originally located on St. Charles Avenue, where De La Salle high school is today. They moved out to the country, as it were, at the time frame. And this was an orphanage run by the city of New Orleans. Its inspiration comes from an architect by the name of Charles Platt, who did many of these Mediterranean villa-style buildings around the country. Two more very handsome homes in the town of Carrollton there. The one on the right is on St. Charles. Notre Dame Seminary, the Redemptorist priest gave the land to the archdiocese to build the seminary. The architect is Allison Owen. He served as an Army general during World War I, saw a lot of the chateaus along the Loire Valley, and he used that as the inspiration for many buildings he designed. And this was very common to happen when soldiers returned. And I'm sorry, it's moving on its own here, at the time frame. Now, of course, we have the courthouse on the right, and it's going back now. The courthouse is, of course, on the right, which is in this Greek Revival style. On the left is a very modest shotgun. This style is known as is known as Southern Colonial Revival. Bernard Lemon used to call this Edwardian, but doing research from the period, this is generally referred to as Southern Colonial. They were looking at Greek Revival buildings and using this as inspiration. The original Greek Revival style started in New England. They were looking to their colonial heritage. But as they moved on to their federal style architecture in the South, we said, heck, if those Yankees can call federal colonial revival, we can call Greek Revival Southern Colonial. And so Southern Colonial is really Greek Revival, and you get houses like this off to the left being built all around town. This is the house that architect C. Milo Williams designed for his brother on Carrollton Avenue. It has half timbering in the left side gable ends over in here as well as here. They have sort of this buttressing, this Gothic buttressing, as you would expect on a church, the building there. This one originally built would have all been very dark color. Notice as the house comes up, it keeps stepping further out, which is a hallmark of this particular style. Here we have three different mission style buildings. The colonial revival style started off in New England looking at their colonial heritage, and other parts of the nation began to say, that's not our colonial heritage. So from out west, we get the mission style. Here we have a house. There was a very similar house that we documented in the previous book, the university section book, overlooking Audubon Park. We do have an old photograph showing that they had an arch here and a mission style window up in here. This was a gas station on Carrollton, on St. Charles Avenue, which has been subsequently torn down since we photographed it. And this was originally a pharmacy. It had the last soda fountain in the city of New Orleans before it closed down there. It went to a Mexican restaurant, and then I believe it's now a Japanese restaurant on Carrollton Avenue there. But these mission parapets are a hallmark of that particular style. Monte della Rosa is done in the Renaissance Revival style, and not only do we get into the history of the congregation and so forth, but we document the architecture of the structure there. We were able to find some of the original drawings. In fact, today I just purchased on eBay a very early photograph of a priest standing right at the doorway there. I'm always looking for images. I never know where they're going to pop up. And I just acquired that one today on eBay. I don't think they realized what it was, but I got it. Here we have a nice little East Lake house built by some riverboat pilots on the avenue. It has had a very postmodern addition added to the rear of the structure there. This house here, we were able to trace the evolution of this. This started off as a 1.5-story structure. It was then lifted into the air, and the first floor was added onto it, and they attempted to make it look like Mount Vernon. So here we've got this colonial revival structure, which started out as an earlier, smaller structure. Not too long ago, there was an estate sale in it, and I went in not to get anything of the estate sale, but I wanted to see the architecture and the interior, and I was able to document that the more important spaces were on the upper floor, whereas you would expect it on the lower floor in here, and it had been elevated on up. This is not an uncommon occurrence in New Orleans. There are several homes on St. Charles Avenue, as well as the Garden District, that got elevated into the air, and a first floor was added to it. A lot of the architecture is from the 20th century in the California style, as you see here. We were able to document several homes that are Sears and Roebuck homes, Montgomery Ward homes, Aladdin and Company homes, and a lot of these houses are coming out of catalogs from the period that we're able to document. We looked at a lot of the churches, not just the big churches, but the smaller churches throughout the community in reference to their architecture, not necessarily their history, but their architecture and how they impacted the area. This wonderful house on St. Charles Avenue, I can't prove, but I believe is the work of H. Jordan Mackenzie. In New Orleans, commonly referred to as Blue Roof Mackenzie because of his home on West End Boulevard with a bright blue roof on it. Mackenzie had seen the work of Joseph Olbrich at the World's Fair in St. Louis in 1904, and he copies a lot of Joseph Olbrich's work in New Orleans. And this is just one of the homes, and I believe this to be the case because the photographs we're able to locate had little men sitting in the niches here. He did the same thing in the French Quarter where there's the building with the men sitting on the niches there. And a lot of the details, particularly on the sod, is reminiscent of Joseph Olbrich's work, and Mackenzie was copying so much of that. And we're able to document who the house was built for, when it was built, and everything else. We used a lot of sewage and water board records, hookup connections to date buildings, and this was one of the buildings we were able to do that. But I was not able to confirm conclusively, other than it looks like his work, that this is the work of Mackenzie. Here we've got a nice Second Empire style house. There's actually a Second Empire style house in Carrollton, which stood on St. Charles Avenue. That was the headquarters for a lumber company. The building on the right, the story in the neighborhood was that when they were building the sewage and water board plants, which is all stucco, the contractor was stealing the materials and built this house from stolen materials from the construction of the sewage and water board plants. Here we have a house which we were able to document was designed by H. Jordan Mackenzie following Joseph Olbrich's work. Here he's got this sort of umbrella green tile roof on it there. And when I teach my class at Tulane at the graduate program there, I show all the precedents in Europe that H. Jordan Mackenzie is copying from Joseph Olbrich's work. This is the oldest house that we were able to document in the town of Carrollton. Beautiful Greek Revival house. The columns, what we call box columns, they're square and they're hollow in the inside. Being Greek Revival, you have simple wooden pickets, or they'd be crisscross in wood. There's this temple form here. Now, the roof pitch was very shallow. During the Greek Revival period, you don't like to see the roof. And what they did, if you look at the side of this building, you can't see because of the tree here, they actually raised the roof line up in here so there was better drainage here, and they went above the parapet there because a lot of these Greek Revival buildings had serious roof problems there and poor drainage on them. Here we have a transitional building from the Greek Revival to the Italianate. What's Italianate are the paired brackets and the modillions in here. And over here, the dorm is right up front. Notice here, somewhat hold back on the Greek Revival. You can't see that roof. Roof is a very unimportant design element. But as we move on into the century, Italianate, Queen Anne, Eastlake, roofs become major design elements. And here we see the dormer and the segmental shapes going on the house there. On St. Charles Avenue, most Tudor Revival houses have a lot of half timbering on it. This house, being out of stucco, doesn't have it, but what makes it Tudor Revival is the diamond panes of glass and the Tudor-shaped arches you see here. Here we have some of the earlier, there's a surprising a lot of Creole cottages. You wouldn't expect, I did not expect that in Carrollton, but there was a lot of Creole cottages. It was basically a very inexpensive house type used by a lot of middle-class citizens in town there. Here we see one of the older houses in a portion of town of Carrollton, Carrollton, which we call Black Pearl today. Here we've got a nice Tudor Revival house. A late Italianate house. Now, Carrollton is a city-designated historic district, but only Carrollton Avenue itself has complete control. The surrounding area only has demolition control. It is also listed on the National Register of Historic Places. Now, covered by our book, we go, here's Lower Lawn up in here. We go all the way to the interstate highway, although there's not much up in there that we had documented. Here you see the water plant. This would be the parish line right in here. So that is the National Register District. Now, in New Orleans, here is the 73 official neighborhoods of New Orleans, and this would be the Carrollton area in here. Among it would be Black Pearl. Black Pearl, the name was developed by Curtis and Davis when they did a study of community development neighborhoods. They asked the African-American residents, what do you call your neighborhood? And they said it was N-Town, and they couldn't use such a derogatory term. They made up the term Black Pearl to call this part of Carrollton. Girt Town, which we hear a lot today, doesn't really come about the time of the period that I cover in the book, because we kind of stop as far as the history goes when Carrollton is annexed from this general store. There's Dixon named for a street, Holly Grove named for a street, River Bend because it's the bend of the river, and we've already mentioned Pierre Marly, who created Marleyville, which he does this in 1834, but that eventually gets abandoned. Here you see Holly Grove, Dixon, coming up to the interstate highway, Girt Town. The city has got Fontainebleau, East Carrollton, and Leonidas up in there. I was told by a elderly reporter for the Times-Picayune that part of this neighborhood at one time was called Silver Can City. I tried my best to find any historical reference to Silver Can. I found steamboats that came into New Orleans with that name. I found all sorts of other things, but I could not find the term Silver Can City ever used for anywhere in New Orleans at all. I found it in other parts of the country in searching, but I couldn't find it in New Orleans. So this is the back cover of the book. The front cover and the back cover were done by Jimmy Blanchard. We had historically been using notarial archives drawings, but nothing really said Carrollton. So Jimmy Blanchard very graciously allowed us to use, for the front cover, the Carrollton Courthouse, and for the rear cover, the Wilkinson House, which was built in 1849. As Danielle told you, you can order this book from the Preservation Resource Center. She gave you the website. I put on the address here and the phone number there. You can also order it from the Friends of the Cabildo 1850 House store, and that's their number there. The retail price is $59.95. The proceeds from both of these are going to the two nonprofits in that. No one makes any money personally off of these books here. And so we appreciate anyone that'll do that purchase of these books. And if you're not a member, I strongly encourage you to join the Preservation Resource Center and the Friends of the Cabildo. Membership does have its benefits. Some of the, or I know the Friends of the Cabildo offer discounts to members when they buy anything in the shop. I'm sure the PRC must have some similar benefits up in there. So, Danielle, we can open it up to questions.
Great. Absolutely. Everyone, send in your questions. Again, you can type them into the chat box or the Q&A box, and I will relay them to Robbie. Okay, Robbie, the first one. Prior to the construction of I-10, what might have been considered the lakeside boundary of Carrollton?
Carrollton would have gone up to the New Basin Canal. That would have been the boundary there, because when you cross that, you were then into Orleans Parish. And so the New Basin Canal was the defining, which ultimately is filled in to become the Pontchartrain Expressway.
Great. Do you know the origin of the...
I'm sorry, you're breaking up, Danielle. Try again.
So sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Do you know the origin of the street name Leonidas? Or is it Leonidas?
I call it Leonidas. No, I don't know that. You might check Frenchmen Desire Good Children in there. I'm not sure of the origin of that street name.
Okay, great. Do you know what Samuel Short's contribution to Carrollton was?
I can't remember. You got to remember, I did this a long time. The book has been at LSU Press for over a year.
Certainly.
It is documented in the book. I can't tell you off the top of my head here, but it is documented in the book. I apologize.
No, don't apologize, please. Okay. When were the houses facing Palmer Park built on Dublin Street?
Those would be all roughly early 20th century, and we do have several of them documented in there. I think Palmer Park, which we do get into the history, I think Palmer Park is up for name changing in the city of New Orleans currently.
Yeah, it's very interesting to see what's going to happen. Okay. One woman wrote in and said, I'm interested in the Carrollton Cemetery. How do I acquire the names and dates of those people buried there? Also, who maintains the property?
That's a little bit, you might want to contact Save Our Cemeteries, may be able to help you with that. I believe the cemeteries in Carrollton are owned and operated by the city of New Orleans. Some of the history, of course, is in the Friends of the Cabildo book on the cemeteries there. But I don't know how you find that sort of information. You might, as I said, might want to check Save Our Cemeteries. They may be able to help with that.
Sure. Okay, great. Did the Carrollton streetcar always end at Claiborne Avenue?
No, it originally stopped at Carrollton. The car barn was there. It didn't go up. That's a later extension. Now, the streetcar eventually will continue down Carrollton Avenue to Canal Street, and it'll do a loop. It was considered the belt loop in that. So you could go from Canal Street, out St. Charles, down Carrollton, back to Canal Street, and start on over. It was the loop at one time. But historically, when it first started out, no, it stopped at Carrollton Avenue. That's where the car barn was, and you did not go up Carrollton Avenue. That's a later expansion.
Got it. Interesting. This is a more broad question, so I'm not quite sure how you might want to answer it. But Thomas has asked, he's curious about what Carrollton was like as a neighborhood during the first decade of the 20th century.
Well, we do have a lot of photographs in the book from that period up in that, so I don't know how to describe that other than looking at the photographs there. We included many of there's not many that we eliminated. In fact, I've never done this before. The friends have never done this before. I have a section called a photo album of all the photographs in the middle of the book. This is the first book that we've done entirely in color. Usually there was a little inset in the middle of the book that was from the notarial archives, but the entire book, where if images were in color, were there. But we do have this photo album in the section in the center of the book that documents a lot of the images of Carrollton during that period of time.
Great. Nathan wonders, what was formerly located opposite the courthouse where there's a strip mall today?
There were a lot of, they called them coffee houses, but they were bar rooms. There was a very famous, we documented the bar room, I think it was the Eagle Bar Room over there, but they called them coffee houses, which was a euphemism in the 19th century for a bar room. So there was a lot, the politicians needed their inebriation to go back to work, so they would go over to the saloons there. There were a lot of German beer gardens too in Carrollton.
Well, that makes sense. Yeah. Okay.
You can look, if you're interested, you can see through New Orleans Public Library, you can go to their databases there and look at the Sanborn insurance maps. The Robinson Atlas will show you footprints of the buildings that were there. So that's a resource available to everyone. You have to have a library card number, but little dirty secret is you really don't need one. Just make one up and you'll get logged in there. It's not like you're borrowing a book, you're just looking at information online there. So some people kept asking me that didn't have a library card, and I finally said, just try putting a number in. Sure enough, you get through by making up a number. But you can see all that through their website there, which is very helpful. Okay,
great tip. Thank you. Pat wondered about how much land was lost when the levee was moved.
It probably a full municipal square and a half at the last move. Now that it gradually was coming back, they were constantly resetting the levees as there were cave-ins. The river would cave in, they would have to move it on back. But that last one at the end of the 19th century, let's see if we can go back to that map. It's not moving very fast on me, I'm sorry. It's at least a full square. It's probably a square and a half there. But that map is documented in the book that shows the land loss. I just don't know why this is reacting so slow. Is there another question while we're waiting on this to move back?
I am looking. I think we don't have any others at the moment. So keep submitting your questions, ladies and gentlemen, if you have questions.
Danielle, I don't know if y'all will take it, but when I did this before, they thought of questions down the road, they submitted it to the friends and they forwarded it to me. I don't know if you want to do that or not.
I'm trying to monitor it in real time. There's actually one that I missed. Is the cover Jim Blanchard painting?
Yes, the cover, the front cover and the back cover are Jimmy Blanchard paintings. In fact, he had them on exhibit at the Ogden Museum of Art. We had to wait for them to come off exhibit so that we could get copies of them. But yes, they're Jimmy Blanchard's.
That's fabulous. This one's more personal, Robbie. One of our viewers loves your accent and wondered which part of New Orleans you grew up in.
I grew up in the French Quarter on Royal Street, right off the corner of Royal and Barrack Street there. That's where I grew up. We then moved to the Broadmoor section of town. We then moved to the 9th Ward of town. We then moved to the lakefront. I then moved to the river. I moved originally to the Garden District, then the Riverbend area, and now I'm in Mid-City. So I'm all around town guy.
Wow, I love that. It's amazing. Okay, here's a great one. What's the history of the Camellia Grill building?
I think the Camellia Grill building, we did not include that in the book. It's this Southern Colonial Revival style, but I don't, let me check the book quickly. I don't believe we included that in the book. With over 1,000 buildings, I can't remember them all. And I've already moved on to the French Quarter. I got probably answer questions better for individual buildings in the quarter.
Yeah, no problem. Let's talk a little bit about Oak Street. A few of our viewers have asked, was Oak always a main street? Was it always commercial, or did it have an earlier life as a residential strip?
It did have an earlier life as a residential strip. There are some residential structures towards the river end of it still surviving, but it eventually took on a role as a commercial strip. Around the turn of the 20th century is when that began to sort of change, being more commercial there.
Interesting.
We didn't quite get into that into detail because it kind of cut the history off with the annexation into New Orleans. I do remember something about coming across fights of the Oak Street merchants with Huey Long for some reason or the other. And of course, the Oak Street merchants are the ones that initially organized the crew of Carrollton, was a businessmen's carnival organization.
Interesting. One of our viewers asks if you have any information on the Methodist Church's influence in Carrollton. Was that significant?
Yes, we included that in the book. There was the Methodist Church was the first church built in Carrollton there, but we did include that in the history of Carrollton there. So yes, it's very influential in that. Volunteer fire associations are very influential development of Carrollton. A lot of the political leaders get their political base in these organizations and so forth. So a lot of these organizations wind up carrying a political clout. Churches as well. We're slowly getting there, but I do not know why this is so hard for this to move. It's just not moving on me.
That's hilarious. Okay, Kim has asked, since there were so many Germans who settled that area, why weren't there more Lutheran churches? That's a good question.
Can't answer that. There were Lutheran churches there, which we did document, but I can't. Let's see. I'm looking at the map right here. I found it in the book here, so I'm not going to wait for it to go back. Actually, it's almost there now. There are There's about 1.5 squares, depending on where you are in the bend of the river, that was lost there. Let me go to churches in the book here. Catholic churches, Baptist churches, Methodist church, Methodist Episcopal, German evangelical Protestant congregations we documented, the German Methodist Episcopal. I'm not quite sure of all the different designations, and with a name like Cangelosi, I'm Catholic, so you can't expect much about these Protestant churches in here. First, let's see, Presbyterian, other churches, Presbyterian, Baptist churches, Catholic. I'm sorry, I don't know why there's not more Lutheran. I would have expected more Lutheran representation in there, but it doesn't seem to be terribly great. I did look up every census, every city directory, every resource that was available, and looking at maps, Sanborn maps, Robinson maps, to document where churches were and so forth. So I documented what I could with the information available.
Sure. Isabel, hi Isabel, is asking, during your research, have you encountered any information on the pressed tin factory that was located on Plum Street and they made tin for use in interiors?
Not that I can recall. Sorry.
Okay. Brad asks, was Thomas Sully just an architect or did he build houses to sell? You did reference the Sully house at one point.
Thomas Sully did a lot of development. He also was an owner of a lot of businesses that supplied architectural products. He's sometimes referred to as Commodore Sully because he was the Commodore at the Southern Yacht Club. I'm sorry, these images are moving on their own there. I'm not even doing that. I guess it's finally reacting. But he did a lot of development in all over town. And there's the map there of the setbacks of the levees. He did a lot of development all over town. He had houses he lived in for a while, then sold. But no, he did a lot of speculative development. His wife, sometimes it's in his name. His architectural partners are also doing development, Stone and so forth. The story that we had heard from older architects that Thomas Sully was more the businessman, the promoter, went out and got the jobs and so forth, but he really wasn't the designer. Toledano did a lot of the designs. A lot of the other people in his firm did the actual designs for the firm as opposed to him. And there are a lot of people today that have, architectural firms, but they turn things over to other people in the firm to do, and they're going out recruiting the jobs and so forth. And that's what an oral tradition that was handed down when we were doing the study of the city of New Orleans community development neighborhoods. We were interviewing older architects and things like that, and identifying areas of town that were eligible for the National Register under a city grant or federal grant.
Interesting. For those of you who are putting questions into the chat about certain buildings, if you have the exact address, I really don't want to ask Robbie about them unless you have the exact address. Just asking, about a certain house on a certain street. He probably won't know off the top of his head. And also, I just encourage you to buy the book because they have, as he said, over 1,000 structures documented in the book, and you'll be able to kind of go down the street, even if you don't know the street address, and look at homes. And we have a lot of people whose ancestors in the audience lived in Carrollton and had raised their families in Carrollton, which is really wonderful. Thank you all for joining us. Stephen Parnes, who's actually been a wonderful benefactor of PRC's digital programming this year, says, as a grandson and great nephew of Leon Weiss and Julius Dreyfus, respectively, I was wondering whether any of their buildings are listed in the book.
Give me a second. We have Julius Dreyfus, George Dreyfus, Felix Dreyfus, and Carol Dreyfus mentioned in the book in various locations. What was Dreyfus? What was the other name?
Stephen, can you type it again? Hold on, let me see if I can find it. I'm sorry, Leon Weiss.
Weiss, okay. I did interview Sobel Cephas before he passed away, and he gave me a lot of the information on the firm, but that was before this book was done. Weiss and Dreyfus is mentioned on page 168 and 235. Then I've got a Frank Weiss and Company on page 248. So
Okay,
those are the
Stephen,
two names there.
you're going to have to order the book and you can have all that information. Okay, we have a question that really harkens, Robbie, to your two-lane teaching. So someone has asked, we live in a bungalow at the corner of Fern and Plum Street that we believe was built in the early 1900s. But the Robinson Atlas of 1883 shows another structure there when the block was mostly empty. Is there any information on what that structure might have been in your book? And if not, where can they find it?
Do you have a specific address?
They don't, but I'm thinking maybe, if it's not in your book, can you advise, should they go to the city's property records, or how would you recommend they try and find it?
To find the earlier structure is going to be very difficult. To find out when their structure was built, they can look at the tax assessment records at the public library. They can look at the sewage and water board record hookups. They need to do a chain of title to see who owned it when, and they can then take that chain of title and go to city directories to find out if any of their owners that are listed in the chain of title are listed at that address. Now, if it was rental property, that's a little bit trickier up in there. So you have city directories, sewage and water board record hookups, and then you have the tax assessment records. Now, looking at the architectural style of the building is going to tell you what window you're looking for. If you've got a Greek Revival building, you're going to go back to the 19th century. If you've got a California-style bungalow, you're going to the early 20th century. If you're dealing with anything after the sewage and water board records start, that's a good way of finding when water is hooked up to the house, which is a good clue to when your house was built, and also looking at the property assessment records. Sometimes there are actually notes there. The Friends of the Cabildo have created a database from information from various archives. That database was used in the production of this book. We have some buildings in this index, which the address is not shaded in gray. If it's shaded in gray, it means there's a full write-up in the back in the photograph. If it's not shaded in gray, it's coming from that database that the Friends of the Cabildo have created. This comes from building permits, building contracts, newspaper records. You can, looking for a needle in a haystack, it's, you can look through the city's, the Tom's-Picayune's bricks and mortar columns. At the end of the fiscal year, they would report on all the building permits taken out in the city of New Orleans, but you have to know when the building is built. We have created this database, but as I said, we took all that information. If it was in the database, it's in the book now. So if they can find the exact address, and we've put the books at the public libraries. We're trying to get them at all the libraries, although some of the libraries are hard to get into right now. Some of the libraries won't even accept the donation of the book right now, which is a little tricky. We're planning on a big release for the book. The Friends are doing walking tours of the Carrollton neighborhood. They've all been sold out. They want to look for one of the tours. If something opens up, they can look there and all. But we plan on doing a big release like we did for the last book. The Brunos had originally offered to let the book signing be at that Gothic house on Carrollton Avenue. That all got scrapped with COVID. We were planning on all sorts of things to go along with the book release, but we're doing things like the Zoom broadcast for the PRC now because of the situation we're in.
Sure. Well, and we're so grateful for that. And it's great to know that y'all are still doing walking tours, because that is such a wonderfully safe activity to still be able to do
We
in this
we do
time.
have a electronic system where people have earphones on and the tour guide is
Oh,
speaking, and they're all kept socially distanced apart
wow.
from one another. That's in the
Wow.
French Quarter, that's in Carrollton. All of the Friends of the Cabildo tours are kept socially distanced.
That's phenomenal, Robbie. What a great great thing to keep the Friends of the Cabildo going right now. That's awesome. Okay, we have two questions related to just the series in general. Tommy asks if there are plans for a Garden District book someday. And then Leno asks, will the Louisiana State Museum provide funding for any future books?
The Louisiana State Museum provides zero funding. The Friends of the
Oh.
Cabildo, from the proceeds of this book, provide funding to the Louisiana State Museum. We
Mhm.
we have a contract with the state where we provide funding every year to the state museum. In return, our members get free admission to the buildings there, and we're in negotiations right now for that. But the state does not give us 10 cents for these books. This
Mm.
is all done, as I said, with volunteer labor. LSU is the publisher this time, so we don't pay for the printing of the books or the distribution of the books, but we do make on the royalty from the sales of the books, and that money is then used for our programs. We do the education programs for the children through the State Museum and so forth. Is there a plan for a Garden District book? We were going to do a Garden District book. Then there was the one that the Historic New Orleans collection was doing that then went off independently because they didn't quite like the way it was going. And so we put that off to the back burner. As I mentioned earlier, we didn't do the French Quarter and Garden District intentionally because those neighborhoods were saved. We went into neighborhoods that needed saving first, like the Lower Garden District, the CBD, to get preservation of those neighborhoods. I don't know who's going to take over this series. I don't know whether I'll live long enough, but yes, there is plan to do a City of Lafayette, which will be the Garden District, Irish Channel, and Central City, the old boundaries of the city of Lafayette. There is plans to do long-range plans to do Mid-City. There's also long-range plans to do Gentilly and the lakefront. Jefferson Parish, they did Shore to Shore for their centennial, bicentennial. They did a book which was patterned after the Friends of the Cabildo book. There was the Friends of the Cabildo very early on did the research for Faubourg St. John, and it was put on the back burner. When Mary Lou knew that she was getting to the end of her life, she came to me and said, listen, we've got all this research. I want this to be done before I go. I'm willing to pay for some of this. And I seriously looked at it and all, and I just said, Mary Lou, I'm trying to get Carrollton out. I'm trying to get the French Quarter out. I knew it'd be put on me. Didn't have all the support that we had. Sam Wilson, Bernard Lemmer, Dorothy Schlesinger, Mary Lou Kristovich, all those people have passed away. Even Judy Bethay that worked on this book has passed away, and I just couldn't handle it. So that's when she went to Louisiana Landmark Society, and they did a book on Faubourg St. John, kind of patterning it after the Friends of the Cabildo series in there. But our intention is to cover the entire city, but there is no funding that comes from any source to do these books. It's all the funds that are put forward comes from the Friends of the Cabildo. For example, when we've got to get copies from the notarial archives or the Historic New Orleans collection, which they don't charge us any royalties for using them, but they do charge for the reproduction costs, which is justified. They've got their expenses, and most of those are all nonprofits too. So I think it's very equitable what people have been doing, but we receive no money from the state.
Robbie, it's just it's heroic work that you've done all of this for so many years as a volunteer. We are all in such debt to you for documenting all this history. So thank you so much for all this work. And for all of you who are writing in saying, that your family used to own property, you might consider making a donation to the Friends of the Cabildo to help support, these efforts, because as Robbie said, no one funds them. So Edgar just wanted to share that his great grandfather lived in an old castle. I'm sorry, not an old castle, an old cottage between Belfast and Apple circa the late 1800s. And he used Fountain Blue as a pasture. So that's very interesting.
Very nice.
Edgar, if you want to know if the home is significant, you should get the book. I'm sure it will be documented in there. You have a fan who wonders if they can audit any of your classes at Tulane, Robbie.
Um, I'm not supposed to say it, but I have no problem with people auditing the class. It is taught in the graduate program. It's also taught in the School of Professional Advancement. And they just asked me whether I would teach an abbreviated course through the architecture school this coming summer, and I agreed to do that. So there are different options. I have to say the courses are expensive. It's not what I charge, it's what Tulane charges, but I have allowed on occasion a few people to audit. It can't be overwhelmed with all auditors and the students that are paying for it and wondering what's going on there. But I have allowed in the past, particularly big supporters of the Friends of the Cabildo, I wouldn't mind big supporters of the PRC to be able to audit the class. You can always take it, not for credit and audit it that way, but if you're talking about ordering it for free, that's I gotta kind of keep that on the down low.
Thank you, Robbie, for sharing that. That's great. Hassan asked if he can get an autographed copy of the book. We don't have autographed copies at the PRC, but is the Friends of the Cabildo selling autographed versions, Robbie?
Yes, I went down and signed a whole bunch of autographed copies there. I may have to go sign some more and all, but when they first came in, I signed a whole bunch of them down there. So the autographed copies are available through the Friends of the Cabildo 1850 House Store Shop.
Fantastic. Okay, so go ahead and give them a call or go on their website and order a signed version of
Danielle, if you want, I'll come down and autograph them at the PRC if that's of any help to you.
Oh gosh, yeah, we'd love that. We'd love that. I know we have a stack of them that we will ship out for all of you who bought them via our website tonight. But yes, if you want an autographed copy, thank you, Robbie. Go ahead and put that in the notes when you buy the copy from prcno.org, and we'll wait until Robbie signs our books to get them to you. Robbie, I cannot thank you enough. This lecture and this book publication could not have been more timely. For those of you who are watching who live in the Carrollton neighborhood, I know that many of you are concerned with developments that are happening in your neighborhood right now. And this book's timing just could not have, the publication, I'm sorry, could not have happened at a better time, because it needs to be stressed to everyone that the buildings in Carrollton are significant, are architecturally significant, are historically significant, and deserve to be preserved. And the future of that neighborhood needs to respect its storied past. And so thank you so much, Robbie, for the incredible work that you did putting this book together over literally decades. The fact that it features over 1,000 properties is absolutely incredible. We look forward to the French Quarter book and hope to support you in your work as you continue to put that together. Thank you so much for your time tonight, Robbie. It really means so much. We're so honored.
Thank you very much for making this opportunity available to your membership.
And I want to thank the Friends of the Cabildo and their executive director, Jason Strada, for also reaching out to me about this program tonight. Thank you to everyone who was watching tonight. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Robbie is always an incredible, every time he presents, it's like drinking from a fire hose. There's so much amazing information. So thank you so much, Robbie, one more time for a wonderful presentation. For all of you who are watching, once again, the PRC has been able to put on free virtual programming through this very crazy year, thanks to the support of our members and donors. So I encourage you to become a member of the PRC or support us with a donation or purchase some of our merchandise, which make great holiday gifts. All of that can be done on our website, prcno.org. Thank you all one more time. Happy holidays. And let's work together to continue to preserve all the amazing neighborhoods and buildings in our wonderful historic New Orleans. Bye-bye.